born of me. Prajanam. O master of the demigods, this is Manu to Brahma, please attempt to lift the earth which is merged in the great water, because it is the dwelling place for all living entities. It can be done by your endeavor and by the mercy of the Lord. Purport: the great water mentioned in this connection is the Garbhodak ocean, which fills half of the universe. Now, there's no specific mention of time lapse between the instructions that were given and Manu's response saying, I shall do, and then, oh, by the way, rescue the earth. We can assume that there was a series of events in between because Hiranyakashipu was born and Hiranyaksha, they did their thing. So it's chronological in sequence, but not, and then a whole bunch of other things happened and the earth fell out of its orbit. It's just not mentioned. But it's Swayambhuva Manu who approached Brahma, please help. Sri Maitreya said, thus after seeing the earth merged in the water, Brahma gave his attention for a long time to how it could be lifted. Dadyao, Diya, Chiram. He gave attention with his dhyam, his intelligence, for a long time. Purport: according to Jiva Goswami, the topics delineated here are of different millenniums. The present topics are of the Shweta Varaha millennium, and topics regard the Chakshusha millennium will also be discussed in this chapter. So what does that mean? Millennium, Prabhupada uses that word in different ways at different times, but in this case it's not just a yuga cycle, but it's the duration of Manu, which is 14 Manus within 1,000 yuga cycles. It's 71 in a fraction yuga cycles, so there's a sandhi in between, 71 yuga cycles. I might remember the math correctly. Times 14 equals the 1,000 yuga cycles. So there's different Manus presiding over those different millenniums. That's a yuga cycle. And there's the Shweta Varaha millennium. Shweta Varaha. That's during a particular Manu. This is, Swayambhuva Manu. And then the Chakshusha Manu, another Manu. Another Varaha appears. That's the Rakta Varaha, red Varaha. So there's white Varaha, red Varaha. Jiva, how do we know? Because there's scriptural references that Jiva Goswami knows, and the narrator, in this case, the narrator is who? Who's speaking? Vidura is speaking with whom? Maitreya. And Maitreya is making reference to what he knows from his vast learning, and ultimately it's Shukadeva Goswami narrating what Maitreya is narrating. And it's Sutta Goswami narrating what Shukadeva was narrating, which Maitreya was narrating. But in any case, aside from who's the narrator, there's different yuga cycles, different Manus overseeing different yuga cycles, and there's pastimes of the Supreme Lord that take place during those different yuga cycles of Manus, and sometimes this and sometimes that. And Vyas, who's compiling all this, isn't taking the trouble to differentiate. But Jiva Goswami is letting us know. He didn't differentiate. He's just kind of blending the two. There's elements of this and elements of that Viraha, all being narrated as if it's one Viraha. Clear? Okay. So, what's Brahma doing? This is what we should do when we hear, there's a problem. Dadyao Diya Chidam. He gave attention with his intelligence for a long time. Now his mind was certainly also occupied, but intelligence. Brahma thought, that's what the mind does. While I have been engaged in the process of creation, the earth has been inundated by a deluge and has gone down into the depths of the ocean. That's the Garbhodak ocean. What can we do who are engaged in this matter of creation? It is best to let the Almighty Lord direct us. So, a little bit, this is Canto 3, and it hasn't gone into cosmology. That's Canto 5. But cosmology says actually it's in the earlier section of Canto 3. So, when Garbhodakshayi Vishnu enters into each universe, what's the universe made up of? It's a shell. Let's go back from the third canto. From the body of Mahavishnu comes golden seeds. It's just a golden seed. And those golden seeds contact Mahatattva. And that Mahatattva means the totality of material ingredients differentiated into different elements, and using Bhaktisiddhanta's language, those elements then cling to those golden seeds, and then the universe starts to expand. The shell of the universe starts to expand. And then Garbhodakshayi Vishnu enters, demigods are produced, etc., 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 by that combination, but they can't do anything without direction of the Supreme Lord. So Garbhodakshayi Vishnu enters into this hollow by his perspiration, and it has a valve that shuts off there for some time. He fills up half the universe with Garbhodak water. Then he lies on the Garbhodak water. The total karma of the living entities in that particular universe are within the living entities, and their karma that's now activated because of time appears from his navel. Commentator Acharyas explains the lotus that comes from the navel of Garbhodakshayi Vishnu equals the totality of karma of the living entities that are within the body of Garbhodakshayi Vishnu. And karma starts to grow in the form of a lotus and lotus stem, and then on top of the lotus stem is a lotus flower, and Brahma appears on top of that lotus flower. He's one of the totality of living entities. And he appears. And then Brahma does what Brahma does, and then he starts creating a universe, and then part of the universe is the earth planet, so the cosmology is there's lower, middle, and upper. Earth is in the middle region. Hiranyaksha is born, and he does the Hiranaksha program. He steals gold from this side of the planet to that side of the planet for his brother. The Earth falls out of its orbit, falls into the Garbhodak Ocean. Brahma's petitioned help. So he considers the Supreme Lord is going to have to provide direction. Vidadatu. Direction. A super soul. But, his father is Garbhodaksha Vishnu, the source of super soul. So whether he's attending to his father, Garbhodaksha Vishnu, or he's attending to super soul, they're one entity anyways, just different functions they're performing. So he's turning to the Supreme, to Vishnu, for carrying out his duty. That's what we should do. We get like, hey, what to do? We also go to those that are authorities, spiritual authorities that help give us guidance in some things, but ultimately it's dependent upon Supersoul. So whether it's Supersoul, Chaita Guru or Sadhu, Shastra, Guru Sadhu Shastra, that's where he's going, Vishnu. He's given this instruction, we discussed it yesterday, to turn attention to Janardhana, ultimately the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. That's what Manu is supposed to do, and Brahma's doing what he's instructed his son Manu to do. It's built into the instruction of the Bhagavatam. How should we carry out ourselves when we're encountering something that's problematic? There are problems in this material world. At least they appear to be. And so it's just an opportunity to turn our attention more to the personality of Godhead. So while he's doing this, much to his amazement, text 18, "O sinless Vidura," all of a sudden, while Brahma was engaged in thinking, abhidyayata, jayata. It's a type of fixing the mind on the personality of Godhead. Not just problem solving, fixing the mind on the personality of Godhead. A small form of a boar came out of his nostril. The measurement of the creature was not more than the upper portion of a thumb. Small enough to come out of his nostril, at least. Oh, descendant of Bharata. So this is Maitreya speaking to Vidura. While Brahma was observing him, that boar became situated in the sky in a wonderful manifestation, as gigantic as a great elephant. Struck with wonder at observing the wonderful boar-like form in the sky, Brahma, with great brahmanas like Marichi, as well as the Kumaras and Manu, began arguing in various ways. So the time has passed because it's not just Swayambhuva Manu, but it's also Marichi. Marichi and the great sages, they also came directly from Brahma. They were to help in the Prajapati program, and they had other qualifications as well. So much significantly later in time lapse from the original creation to, and the creation of Swayambhuva Manu to this event. So here's what they were discussing. Is this extraordinary entity, is this some extraordinary entity come in the pretense of a boar? It is very wonderful that he has come from my nose. First of all, this boar was seen no bigger than the tip of a thumb, And within a moment he was as large as a stone. My mind is perturbed. Is he the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu? He's speculating. We're not supposed to speculate. Since Brahma is the supermost person in the universe, and he had never before experienced such a form, he could guess that the wonderful appearance of the boar was an incarnation of Vishnu. The uncommon features symptomatic of the incarnation of Godhead can bewilder even the mind of Brahma. Uyanti at Surayaha. Familiar with that phrase from the first verse of the Bhagavatam? And it's creating adbhuta, it's creating astonishment. It's a rasa, it's a secondary rasa. It's stimulating his primary rasa that's discussed in Brahma Samhita. Different Brahmas have different rasas with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, astonishment. While Brahma was deliberating with his sons, the Personality of Godhead Vishnu roared tumultuously like a great mountain. Purport. It appears that great hills and mountains also have their roaring power because they are also living entities. The volume of the sound vibrated is in proportion to the size of the material body. When Brahma was guessing about the appearance of the Lord's incarnation as a boar, the Lord confirmed Brahma's contemplation by roaring with his gorgeous voice. Now, unless you read the Bhagavatam, most likely people aren't going to think of mountains as personalities. Govardhan Hill, mythology, right? And it's not. There is such a thing as mythology. Here's one. There's this whole interesting, complex mythology. Local Indians in Alaska don't call Mount McKinley, they call it Denali. And there's a whole story about Denali. And then there's, Denali. Now, how that connects with anything Vedic, I don't know. But one can assume either A or B. It's just total mythology. They just have some lore and they made it up. Or something else. Somehow some people that populated that region, the Indian population that inhabited that region at one time were somehow connected to a Vedic culture and somehow something. So it's not really, that's a possibility. We don't speculate how that happened. Just stepping back one more step, something that I learned from studying Sadhaputa's writing. Sadhaputta, anyone here not know who is Sadhaputta? Sadhaputta is a Prabhupada disciple who was a PhD graduate from Cornell University in mathematics. Prabhupada, he's a genius. He's now expired, but genius. Prabhupada requested him, I want you, this was long ago, to make a model of the Vedic planetarium. I want you to study the 5th canto and nail it. Like, understand it. and then, based upon your understanding, make a model of the Vedic planetarium, because I want a Vedic planetarium, and you have the assignment of designing it. He's a mathematician. But he studied it, he took it seriously, and it took 25 years, and he made a model. But getting there, he wrote 2 books. One was Vedic Cosmology and Cosmography. Interesting title. And in that, one of the things he did is he studied world cosmologies, without naming the names, all over the world, this, that, the other. And he found something interesting, same thing that the scholars who had before him studied the same thing, and that is there's great symmetry between the cosmology in Siberia and South America and Africa and Scandinavia and the Far East and this and that. There's elements, not identical, but very, very similar elements. So similar, it can't just be like, oh. So then the scholars prior to him considered there's 3 possibilities. It's just an accident. And they ruled that out. Well, it's not so likely. It's just all over the world, just an accident. Second option, there's your DNA wired to have a cosmology like that. That's not so likely. Then the third was there was at one time a culture all over the world that had one cosmology, and over time that one cosmology became diverse. But there's elements of that one cosmology. And they weren't so comfortable with that. But that was, more likely than the other 2. They didn't conclude, but we know there was. So now back to Denali. Who knows? And that's just one place. There's so many other possible connections of how that idea of Denali came into being. So whether it's A or B, it's not really so important. Back to the Vedic picture. The Vedic picture says, this is Prabhupada's, an explanation I've heard more than once. Mountains, some mountains, there's this, whatever it's called, plates, what's the word? Tectonic, or what's the word? Plates underneath the earth? What's the word? Starts with a T. Underneath the surface of the earth, there's plates of stone. Tectonic plates, thank you. So when they shift, boop, then there's tremors. And then sometimes the tremors result in, boop, there's mountains. That's one idea, where the mountains came from. Maybe some mountains came from that. What's behind the shift of the plates, that's another question. But while that may be an explanation or not, that is what the Vedic text indicate is some mountains are living entities, and they grow mountain bodies. Then after some time, those mountain bodies, the soul departs, and then there's just like bones of a dog or a dinosaur or a man or a whatever. And so it's like bones, mountains, where the living entity is now gone. There's no life inside, but in some cases there's life inside. And that's why the mountain grows. Now, modern science will say rubbish. And the Vedic literature says there's living entities within mountains, some. And the bodies of those mountains, they grow. So this is one of those examples. right in the Bhaktivedanta purport. Mountains roaring. I've never heard a mountain roar, but that doesn't mean mountains don't roar, because I haven't heard one. And just like referring back to yesterday evening, one of the essentials in progressing on the bhakti path, or the 9 stages of bhakti, one of the essential elements is not blind, but faith in, he didn't use this language, Vishwanath, but aparusheya shabda. What's that? Shabda pramana is authority through sound. Your GPS does it all the time. It's authority through sound. You put in the destination, satellite tells you where you are, or finds out where you are and says, no, here's where you go. And so it's information, it's sound vibration that tells you how to get from point A to point B. That's sound vibration. There's an authority. And usually it works. Sometimes there's glitches, but usually it works. Or, from my practical experience, is the flight on time, or is it delayed? You don't ask, a family member. You don't go to the gas station and ask the guy at the gas station, is my flight on time? You call up the airlines or do it, they're the authority. It's through sound vibration, it's on time, or it's delayed, or whatever it is. So we operate with Shabda Pramana all the time. All the time. We don't necessarily are understanding what we're doing, but it's fallible. Sometimes it says it's on time and it's delayed, and sometimes it says it's delayed, it's on time. It's, sometimes GPS, I've had experience. It's just, there's a glitch and it doesn't, just takes you in a loop. I've had experience. So it's not always right, because it's fallible. But then, aparusheya shabda is beyond the fallibilities of a living being. That's the Purusha, and there's aparusheya, the infallible Supreme Lord. That's the Vedas. Now, how do I know? How do I know? Somebody over there says, and somebody over there says, so how do I know? You know that one. And then the rendering of this aparusheya shabda, someone says and someone says, how do I know? So for starters, there's acceptance of the authority of the Vedas. And if you don't accept the authority of the Vedas, then you accept another authority. We went over this. What's that other authority? My mind. Or here's an example. Prabhupada said this many times, that when he was with Professor Kotovsky in Moscow, he said, Professor Kotovsky, you and I are the same. We both have to accept an authority. You accept Lenin, I accept Krishna, but we both have to accept an authority. Now we can talk about which is the better authority, Lenin or Krishna. But we're the same. We accept some authority. And it's reasonable to accept an authority that's infallible. Now, how do you know what's an infallible authority? So it requires some faith. Now, but not blind faith. We use our faculties of reason and so forth. We look at perfected souls. Over and over again, Prabhupada referred to this. The great personalities, this one, that one, that one, that one, that one, they accepted the authority of the Vedas. And accepting the authority of the Vedas, the conclusion of the Vedas, that Vishnu is supreme. Now, how do you know? Well, there has to be some faith in the source of that understanding, the scripture. And it's exactly a question in Bhagavad Gita. If you don't have that faith in Vishnu or Krishna, what happens? You have faith in something else, according to the modes of nature. which means faith is intrinsic to the soul. It's of the soul. You can repose it here or there or somewhere. And you could say, I'm faithless. I don't have faith in anything. That's a faith. So that means I have faith in me. Well, I don't have faith in me, so then you become an existentialist and you drive your car off a cliff, like Albert Camus did, because nothing matters. There's no anything. Nothing matters. So life doesn't matter, and you just... So that's a faith. It's of the soul. So it's reasonable. We use our faculty of reason, which can't get us to beyond temporary. It can't get us to transcendence. But it's reasonable that we must have faith, and it's reasonable to accept that authority. And because many other persons have, and it's the same as what Arjuna does in Bhagavad Gita. After Krishna shows the universal form, before the universal form, Arjuna is asking questions, and Krishna gives his definition of himself as the source of everything. Arjuna says, I accept. But it's not just, we're friends, I accept. You're great. There's other authorities that accept. And it's declared in the Vedas, and I accept the Vedas. So if we don't accept the Vedas, that's a possible option. If we don't accept the authority of the Vedas, then bhakti won't develop, and we'll be in this position where we'll never know. Although we may think, I know. We'll be in the position where we never know because we're not connecting to an apaurushaya source. Everything is infallible, other than the apaurushaya. It's paurushaya. It's fallible. Defects of the conditioned soul, etc. So it's not just, I want to have faith in something that's perfect, and so I'll just flip a coin and choose this one. There's strength in making the choice of the Vedas. So once we go there, then all kinds of things that are not known can be known. Prabhupada gives the example. A small child says, Daddy, what's this? And Daddy says, this is a watch. Now what does the child know about watches? But because Daddy says, he knows it's a watch. No, his fullness of realization of watchness, the quality of watches, it's just a child, but at least he knows it's a watch. Not wrong, not full realization, but he's because there's authority. Or the other one, Mom, who's my father? So and so is your father. She's the authority. She can say. So the Vedas tell us so they tell us so many things. They tell us who the father is. Vedas is the mother, and the mother discloses who the father is. That's revealed scripture and details about the father. And so here's one of them, mountains that roar. Well, we're conditioned souls influenced by modern science, and modern science doesn't say that. So we may struggle with, modern science doesn't say that. I never heard a mountain roar. I've never seen a mountain grow. Tectonic, that's the word? That's how it happens. I've never seen a tectonic plate shift and make a mountain either. But, I believe in science. I've just got this I believe in science. Look at all this good stuff that they've done. They've created this and that and the other thing, and scientists say it's got to be, because they just have this blind faith in science. Got to be. That's how mountains came. I have an issue with that. Prabhupada has an issue with that. Just a little example. I remember in high school, that was a few years ago, I was in high school. We learned about this in science class, because I really like science and math. So we learned about continental drift. It was a theory, and it was a ha, 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 ha. The really dumb people have this theory. Then, I didn't hear anything more about it, went to college, and then after college I saw in a National Geographic this article that said, anybody that doesn't believe in continental drift is ha, 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 because that's how it happened. Once upon a time, da-da-da-da. And then there was this shift, and then, continents started moving. And that's how you got the Himalayas. This continent, continental drift shifted, and so then came the Himalayas. That's how the Himalayas came. Wow. Not so many years ago, 10, 12 years ago, it was ha-ha. Now it's anyone that doesn't accept it is goofy. And that's science. Whew. Etc. And that's the way of science. Without illustrating other examples. They really don't know. But they're posing themselves as we know because they're scientists. That's their livelihood. And they have prestige, and people say, if science says, then it's got to be. And you can't have mountains that roar. So it's mythology. End of discussion. And for the devotee, we're challenged by, that's not what science says, so here's what the Vedas say, the mountains that roar. Now what do you do with that contradiction? Well, it depends on who you are. You can just reject the Vedas, or say, well, some things and then some other things. Or you can just park it over there and say, one day I'll understand. And right now I don't understand. Then it can be the blind faith, whatever it says. But you may not even have the right understanding of what it says. I've had that experience. I thought, reading something, it meant this, and then some time passed and it didn't mean this, it meant something different than this. We have to refine our understanding of what the Vedas are saying as well, because we got our filters, the modes of nature and karma. We can't hear the Vedic conclusion, even with the explanation of our acharyas properly, because we're conditioned souls with filters. But that doesn't change the intrinsic faith in Apaurushaya Shabda Pramana. So Lord Varaha roared. And our acharyas are telling us, Prabhupada is in this purport, but the roaring was to confirm, yes, I'm Lord Vishnu. And the sound was such that it wasn't just like a loud noise, but the language says it's very pleasing. And just like last night at the program, there was having a little problem with the staticky sound from the microphone and the speaker. And some of the, at least from looking at the audience, some were shocked and cringed, so that's not a pleasing sound. And roaring may not be a pleasing sound, but this one was a pleasing sound. So when the Supreme Lord roars, it's a pleasing sound, at least for the devotees. When Lord Nrsingadev roared, it was fearful. And even the demigods, their devotees, they were fearful. But the explanation of why they were feeling fearful is right in the verse, and it's explained by our acharyas, it was a secondary rasa of astonishment. That enhanced the primary rasa of the demigods and the goddess of fortune. Now, where does our faith lie? That's an important question. And so this topic in the evening is the stages of bhakti, and in the preliminary stage, faith is characterized as soft and pliable. In the intermediate stage, it becomes firm. And in the topmost stage, it's not only firm, it can't be touched by any material circumstance, and one has scriptural understanding that supports that conviction of faith. So there's degrees of faith. Naturally, there's degrees of everything. There's degrees of bhakti, and a measure of bhakti is a measure of faith. So I'm spending time on this because, we're all educated people, and, mountains don't roar. That's it. Mountains are not living entities that roar. That's it. So and we just kind of don't pay attention to that one. Put it over there and put it under the rug and hide it. So I'm not doing that. I'm specifically, how do we process things that it's not part of what we learn from, our education, modern education system? Or supposing there's, a child that grows up reading the Bhagavatam, and then they go out in the world and they meet people that say, you're a confused person. You can't accept this. And, then the child gets confronted with people that say, you're confused, or you're a fanatic, or something, some negative something. Or they may not say it, just kind of vibe it. Something's wrong with you. Or they may say it. How can you accept Krishna lifted a mountain? Come on. Come on. No, we have our understanding. He has unlimited potency. Unlimited means unlimited. Is there a limit? No, because I'm limited. I can't do that. Krishna can't do that? We can lift something. The Bhagavatam says he lifted the Govardhan hill like a frog's umbrella. What's a frog's umbrella? It's a mushroom. And when it rains, frogs go underneath a mushroom. That's a frog's umbrella. So he lifted Govardhan hill like a frog's umbrella. Effortlessly. Purposefully, with one hand. Purposely with his left hand. Purposely with the little finger of his left hand. And held it, just try to lift your arm for 7 days and 7 nights, lifting your arm. We don't, maybe you can do that. Practice at it, maybe you can do it. Krishna didn't have to practice at it. So it's mythology. If you're, depending, or you just don't pay attention to it, you just don't even notice it. It's, isn't that nice? But so there's faith. All of this rests on faith in the scripture. This aparushaya shabda pramana. And with that, bhakti can progress, and without it, bhakti can't progress. It doesn't have to be mature faith yet, but there has to be this intrinsic faith in, and I don't have full realization as yet what watches are, but Dad says it's a watch, so it's a watch. I accept its authority. And as we mature in bhakti, then we can start to have more understanding of what the Vedas say. there's life within every living entity. The trees out there, the fog is not there this morning, so there's trees and there's things going on. Yesterday I had a meal outside. There's little tiny red spiders all over in the lawn. Like one of them got on the coconut. So, little guy, tiny little guy. There's living entities all over the place. And within that living entity, there's a spark of life. And within, side by side with that spark of life, there's Paramatma. Same one as here. How do I know that? Purusheya Shabda Pramana. And if you don't have that faith, then you know, squish the guy. Or whatever. You know, no responsibility at all, because I'm at the center. So we don't live our lives that way for scriptural authority reasons. And anyway, so let's see if there's some discussion on the roaring of mountains. Yeah.
Thank you so much for explaining such a complex mechanics. So simple terms to learn. It's always amazing to hear this from you. You were mentioning about the child who is been hearing from devotee teachers and Bhagavatam. They have faith in Vedic perspective. I'm actually facing it personally. The kids going to public school, they have to hear the modern science perspective.
Sure.
And one of them actually tried to refute that, and he got in trouble with the teacher. This might be a common question to you. How do they have to deal when they go to public?
How do the children deal, or how do you deal with children that confront with that? How do the children deal with that? Well, it depends on the teacher. You have to, you know, intelligence is a factor of discrimination. And, you know, so it have to be discriminating, depending upon the teacher, depending upon the mood in the classroom. It could be not like, let me refute your ideology. It could be just, you know, say, here's some options, A, B, C, D, E. Say nothing, but just process. Interesting. Science says this, and the Vedas say that, and I have, you know, what's the basis for my accepting the authority of what the Vedas say as opposed to that? Just a parallel intelligence, I call it. He wants to get an A in the exam, so he gives the, you know, what the teacher says in the exam. But he, at the same time, he knows here's the Vedic paradigm. And it's different than what. Then another is, say, in the classroom, you know, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, you may find this interesting, but in the teaching, spiritual teachings that I have learned from, here's a different explanation. Not to refute. So that's, say it in the classroom. A third option is have a private discussion with a teacher. Not during the class, because the teacher's got to defend himself. And so this is, I wanted to share with you. And if you like, I can get, you know, the reference that says specifically what the Vedas say. Or, you know, here's another option. My dear Mr. So-and-so, professor, teacher, I'd like to provide you, here's a copy of a Nobel Prize winning physicist that studied the Vedic model of Sankhya philosophy and concluded that it's not, there's nothing within modern science that contradicts it. Would you be interested to read it? Because the picture there is different than what what you've given to us in the classroom. I'm not challenging what you've given to us in the classroom. Here's another model. It's not falsifiable by any findings in modern science, at least findings known by Professor Henry Stapp. Would you be interested to read it? So if you argue in the classroom, you're going to get put in your place, because the teacher has to defend his position. He's hired to teach what he's teaching, and you're challenging what he's teaching. You're going to get put down. He has to. I mean, not has to, but that's what he's hired to do. Because in the education system, anything other than the picture that they present, it goes over there. It's not science. It goes in the religion department. It's not science. Here's what science is. Repeat after me. This is what science is. And over there is religion. So don't bring religion into the science classroom. And that's not just, Professor X. That's the whole education system in the West, at least today. The intellectuals are well defensed. They're trained up. Anything else? Yes?
Thank you very much, Maharaj, for such an interesting discussion on science and Vedic knowledge. I always have this challenge within that both scriptures as well as science demand some amount of faith.
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
But when we deal with the so-called scientists, they always say that our faith is reasonable because we have...
Our faith is what?
Our faith is reasonable enough because we have explanations for what we are speaking about. But when you say things like, Krishna lifting over the hill, this is like too much faith. This is too much beyond our,
So you want to know how to respond to that?
Yeah.
That which is, so your premise is it's within reason, and that one over there is too much. Two things, just for starters. Practical experience is that which is of reasonable faith keeps shifting and shifting and shifting and shifting and shifting. That's the history of science. It keeps shifting. Reasonable faith keeps shifting. That says something. Your reasoning faculties are fallible. According to the Vedas, tarka apratishta. You can't establish truth with a capital T or science through reasonable faith. It's shifting always. Always. Always, always, always. And then the second is, it's connected. There's defects of every conditioned soul, 1, 2, 3, 4. And therefore, science is dependent upon two things, three things, but empiric data, that is, so the sense perception, fallible. Then evaluation of the sense perception, imperfect. Science says, scientist A and scientist B look at the same data and interpret it differently. It goes on in science all the time. So it's reasonable this one, reasonable that one, and it's different. So which is it? It's reasonable to say that reasoning faculty is imperfect. And the sense, so it's reasonable, and it within reason, it's guaranteed to be fallible. So that, before we go over to the next one, are we in agreement? There's 4 defects, and it's always changing. The reasonable one. So it's insubstantial. Now let's go to the other one. It requires some faith. The premise is there is a reality beyond this reality. And that reality that's beyond this reality has knowledge that's infallible. That's a premise. Now you can rule it out. It's too much to accept that. But let's explore that. Are you open to exploring? There's a reality beyond the reality that our mind and senses can experience. The details of what that is comes next, but is there the possibility of that? Let's take a look at what some great minds have said. This one, that one. So this is the same process as the Vedic process that Arjuna says, the great authorities they accept. So great authorities, this one, that one, that one. Do your research. And they say, the grains of sand on the shore of the ocean. That's beyond you and me and our capacity to understand what's beyond what we know. So is it reasonable to accept that there's truth and there's reality beyond our capacity? You can say no. And there's others that say yes. I say yes. And I'm, following the authority of, I have this intuition, this conviction, this thing that says there is a reality that's beyond the mind and the senses, beyond temporary. I have that conviction. And there are scientists that do too. Brilliant. Not just one, many. Here's this one, here's that one, here's the other one, here's the other one. What do you think? Reasonable or unreasonable? Too much or not too much? Science. I'm using your paradigm. I'm not using mine. I'm using yours. Is it reasonable? And then there's detail. Okay, so here's some detail. A fundamental principle, this is now Jiva Goswami, very reasonable. Without accepting that which is the source of everything has unlimited potency, then there's no possibility of understanding that which is beyond the limited. It has to be unlimited. Otherwise, it's not. It's within the purview of the limited. So it must be. And if there's unlimited, then there you go. Let's, take the sun. Where does the sun get its power? We know there's an explanation, but it keeps the same temperature for how long? And if it got to be hot or cold, a little bit, it ran out of fuel. So where's it getting its energy? Ball of fire. What happens after time? If it's just fire, the fuel's gonna burn out. Well, yeah, it'll burn out. So why is it keeping the same temperature? And for how long? Anyway, so you have your theories. And here's another one. Which one's more reasonable? Well, for you, it's more reasonable. And for me, this one's more reasonable. We don't know. You don't know? I mean, that's the argument of some person. This is more reasonable, that's more of a stretch. Whatever other thing. I would suggest that you read Sariputta's writings, mechanistic and non-mechanistic science. And he's got all kinds of things. Like one of my favorite ones is inspiration. There's a mechanistic explanation, and there's a non-mechanistic explanation, which is more reasonable. As a mathematician, he demonstrates it's not possible. You read it. Mathematically, it's not possible. So is it plausible to say that one? Or is it plausible to look at another alternative? That's his approach. The whole book is that kind of an approach. You can read it, you just gift it to your friend, ask him to, let's read this chapter together and we'll look at it. It's the methodology is, here's the model, there's the bucket, and let's pour water in the bucket and see how many holes there are in the bucket. Look at this hole and that hole. It doesn't hold water. Bucket's got holes in it. Maybe you need to look at another bucket. That's his approach. I think we're going to end. It's 8:15. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.